Okay, everybody. I'm the second to last person before you head out the door. Hope we can have a good time together. My name is Nick Caldwell. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first, but a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about my first impressions of Atlanta, if you'll indulge me, because this is my first time in Atlanta. I've only been in Atlanta for about, 5 hours now, and I've already learned 3 important things, courtesy of my taxi driver. I tried to convert it into a slide. One is it's not Atlanta, it's Atlanta, all right? All right? The second thing, which I had no idea, I don't know if you guys watch Walking Dead, but Walking Dead is apparently like set in Atlanta. And then the other thing, which I totally whiffed on, which I deserve, I didn't know that Coca-Cola was such a thing here, and I guess I should have known that before I came in because the taxi driver said, "Bless your sweetheart." I know for sure she didn't legitimately mean to bless my sweetheart.
She meant it.
Yeah.
The thing about your slide is that is a very accurate depiction of how
The traffic.
Depending on whether you're coming into town or out of town.
So she was telling me OT, the perimeter or something like that? Yeah. So the one other thing that I got to experience over lunch, which I just want to warn you guys about, I love Atlanta so far, but like this sweet tea will kill you. It is, it is so strong. Have you had a drink with so much sugar that your teeth are chattering after you drink it? It's good. It's good. Look, danger. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just, be aware of what you are eating. Anyway, we're actually not going to talk about Atlanta today. We're going to talk about a topic I'm really excited about. It's about how to create new leaders in an organization. So before I get into that, I will introduce myself. My name is Nick Caldwell. Let's see, I've done several things in my career. I have 15 years at Microsoft, worked my way up to a position of general manager for a 300-person team called Power BI. It's a big business intelligence team there. I went to Reddit. If you guys know what that is, it's a site where you try and monetize cat pictures. And I ran engineering there for 2 years. I scaled that team from 35 engineers up to about 170. And up until yesterday, I was chief product officer at Looker, where I was helping them build out new product roadmaps, scale the engineering team. We just got acquired yesterday, so I don't actually know what my title is. I don't care what they call me as long as the check's clear, though. So we were totally fine with that. And I'm actually really excited to be part of Google. I don't know if there's any other Googlers in the room. No, I saw them sponsoring the booth, but I'm real excited about that. So a lot of what I want to talk about here is kind of based on my experience at Reddit, scaling that organization so quickly. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we had to deal with there. We had an early challenge. CEO was like, "Hey, Nick, I want you to come in. We're going to grow really, really fast. We just raised a fundraising round. We need you to triple the size of the engineering team. We need to do it in 1 year." And they had this kind of problem with scaling, which I characterize as all tech leads, but no managers. So I don't know if you guys have experienced this before, but tech lead is actually a pretty nebulously defined role in our industry. And you can't scale your organization unless you actually have someone who feels like it's their job to do management, like take care of people, take care of the organizational process, predictable schedules, quality, et cetera. That's generally what managers do. Come on in, don't be shy. You're not going to get in trouble. So one of the first things I had to do if I wanted to scale was tease apart this distinction that between all these tech leads, I think we had like 10 of them, and 0 managers. So how many of you guys have ever seen the movie Blade Runner? Blade Runner? Okay, great. So if you guys don't know what Blade Runner is, this is a movie where a private investigator has to try and hunt down androids. But the catch is they look like human beings. All right? So he uses this test. It's called the Voight-Kampff test. And he hooks what might be an android or human being up to this machine. It's like a little lie detector test. Asks him a few questions. And depending on the reaction, if it turns out to be a human, fine. If it turns out to be an android, well, he just shoots them on the spot. So we decided to do the same thing with our tech leads. All right. And the test looked a little bit like that. Tech lead goes in. We asked a few questions. Actually, to just be clear, we didn't literally just do this on the spot. This occurred over the course of several one-on-ones. I've run teams before. I'm funning with you guys. We're having a good time. So ask a few questions. What do you care more about, people or architecture? Pretty straightforward. Managers need to care about people. Architects are going to care more about the tech and the architecture. What are your thoughts on shipping towards a deadline? I don't want to, make anyone feel threatened, but in general, what you see with architects is a desire to see the perfect tech implemented, irrespective of how long it might take. I've had that interaction not unfrequently with architects. Whereas if you're a manager, you need to be focused on deadlines, quality, getting things out the door. Your PM tells your reports to immediately start working on a feature. What do you do? All right. Hopefully, if you're a manager, you're going to protect the team, protect the roadmap, and maintain predictability. You spend one full day a week working with recruiting, only to hire no new people. How do you feel about that? All right. So we ask questions like this to determine architect or manager. And we split them into those two tracks. And this approach went really well. We ended up with 20 new managers and a few directors, 10 architects. 50% of them came from within and 50% came from without. And after about a year, if we look back, this was about 90% accurate. A few of the managers went back into the IC career path. All of the architects stayed architects. But there was kind of a challenge that arose as a result of this. I was having coffee with our CEO, and he was like, Nick, great job. We've now hired, I think we're at that point, we're like 120 people. We'd scaled all these managers. But he said, it feels like at this stage in the company's growth, we're no longer solving our problems with people stepping up and taking leadership. We're just throwing more bodies at the problem. And he actually kind of has a point. Like, it's something that I've observed. Like, as you scale up, a few things happen. You get more specialization, right? So if you're a really, really small team, say like a founding team, literally your CTO might be on sales calls or marketing calls. It might be embarrassing, but someone's got to do it. And as you scale up, you get more and more crisply defined roles and specializations, to the point where people who would otherwise step into a different lane, take on some authority, step back. Instead, they step back and say, that's not my job, that's someone else's job. Also, what can happen? Politics and boundaries. You're starting to make org charts. These orgs each have different goals. I mean, as you scale up, you have to, subsection your team and give this group A a goal and group B a different goal, and that might cause some politics. And what ends up happening holistically is you don't have that same set of holistic ownership, the feeling that any single person on the team can take a leadership role anywhere else in the company. It starts to get smaller and smaller in scope. So the impact of this, the impact of reduction of leadership is pretty big. I found this chart. I don't know if you guys use Blind. It's a pretty awful application, but occasionally they do these surveys which are somewhat interesting. And it just talks about the impact of missing leadership: lower productivity, lower retention, lower development, poor delegation. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is missing leadership, missing the ability for people to step up or feel empowered in that way, results in a higher rate of burnout than actually just giving people more work, right? That should be really fascinating to most people. So the question I had after that conversation with my CEO is like, what do we do about this, all right? What do we do so that, when you have a 10-person company and all 10 people are acting like leaders, how do you scale that up? So if you have a 100-person company, all 100 people are acting like leaders. So that is what I want to talk to you guys about today. Are you guys still with me? Okay, cool. I hope you find yourself in the right place. So I'm going to give you 3 ideas, and I'm going to give you several tools, all right? And hopefully you can take these back into your organizations, whether or not you're a manager or an IC, and try and develop new leaders. So we'll talk through the 3 ideas, and then you'll get a couple tools for each idea. So first one, very, very important, is this concept. I had a mentor come to me, long while back now, but he said something that stuck with me. He said, my manager said that I am not ready to lead. He said, I don't have enough people skills. I'm not ready to put you in a position to have people report to you, right? So this is kind of a problem if you pick it apart, because it implies that to lead, you have to be a people manager. And I want to disavow you of that notion. Let's talk about the difference between leadership and management, because I claim that leadership is not management, all right? So if you think about it, managers, what do? All right, good manager, predictability, all right, planning. You want to know what is going to get shipped, when, and at what quality level. That's essentially the essence of what management means. And now if you get a great manager, they do those things, plus they produce a great, happy team, right? So if you can get awesome people working on clear deliverables on a predictable timeline, that is what the essence of management is. Now, let's think about what leaders do. And don't read that chart, y'all. Jesus Christ. People are taking photos of it. I'm going to stand right here. No, I'm just messing with you. All right, so what do leaders do, though? Like, leaders, if anything, are not about predictability. They're trying to find what the new hill is going to be. They're trying to use social encouragement. They're trying to use their relationships. They're trying to inspire people to do something that was totally different than what you were going to do before. They're trying to break you off of that beaten path to take on some new role, all right? So leaders fundamentally, I will make this claim, are introducing instability, whereas managers manage. Isn't that great, like how the thing you're supposed to do is in the job title? So the question is like, I'll just keep defining it. Like I went online, this was kind of the best, I guess, quote or pithy quote I could find to articulate this distinction. Leadership is working with goals and vision. Management is working with objectives. But I want to leave you guys with a story. I think pithy quotes is not where I want to end this, because there's a really, really great historical story. It's one of my favorites. You guys know what the Manhattan Project is? All right, good. I hope you do. All right, pass your history class. Man, if you didn't know this, though, the Manhattan Project wasn't just a couple, propeller heads in a room coming up with diagrams on how to build weaponry. This was enormous. It was probably by far the largest logistical problem in the history of the country. So more than 100,000 companies worked together on the Manhattan Project. It wasn't just scientists. Where did all the equipment come from? Where did all the testing equipment come from? How did the laboratories get built? The 100,000 companies needed to be coordinated in order to work on this weapon, which ended World War II. Now, most people think of the leader of the Manhattan Project as a man named Robert Oppenheimer. You guys heard of Oppenheimer? Okay. So Oppenheimer, brilliant scientist, considered the leader of the Manhattan Project. Really, really inspiring. If you think about this unsolved technical challenge, he's jumping straight into it. So a little bit about Robert Oppenheimer. I found a quote from someone who worked for him. It was just an amazing quote. I hope that you live to see the day that someone says this about you. Let's see what he says. He knew how to organize, cajole, humor, soothe feelings, how to lead powerfully without seeming to do so. He was an exemplar of dedication, a hero who never lost his humanness. Disappointing him somehow carried with it a sense of wrongdoing. Los Alamos' amazing success grew out of the brilliance, enthusiasm, and charisma with which Oppenheimer led it, all right? This sounds like a leader, all right? But I'm telling you, this is not the dude that coordinated 100,000 companies. This is the dude that got scientists excited about stuff. Let's talk about another person who was the guy considered the manager of the Manhattan Project. His name, most people haven't heard of him, but his name is Leslie Groves. And let me share with you a quote I found about Leslie Groves from one of his longtime friends. The biggest son of a bitch I've ever met in my life. All right, so he goes on, all right? He had absolute confidence in his decisions. He was absolutely ruthless in how he approached a problem to get it done. I've often thought that if I were to have to do my part all over again, I would select Groves as a boss. So I hope you guys kind of get the distinction here. Actually, for you historical buffs, this is a really good person to look into, because he was one of the true founders of Agile methodology. I'm not making this up. When I read it, my eyes kind of bugged out. This dude used Agile methods to build atomic weaponry. So fail fast. Anyway, look into it. Now, if you're still not convinced with that story, just look at the mathematics of it. If you require people to have people reporting to them in order to be leaders, the mathematics of it simply doesn't work, all right? The number of people in your organization scales linearly. If you require managers to be leaders, that scales logarithmically, all right? And the other thing I would say is in any org chart, and I'm saying this as a person who's managed at this point thousands of people, all the smart people are down here. You want to make sure that they're in charge of stuff and have the ability to lead, all right? Trust me. Now, the other reason you want to think about pulling apart leadership and management, it's actually what people want in terms of incentives. So I found this data from a McKinsey Global survey. It was comparing different incentives, like different things that motivate employees. And if you dig into the data, giving individuals leadership opportunities has a higher rate of retaining employees than giving them money. All right, it's not a whole lot more, because trust me, people aren't insane, but it's a little bit more. And this should get, what I want to do here is get across the point that you have to think about this differently. Giving people opportunities to lead is a massive incentive, even more so than giving them money. So if you believe that, I want to give you some tools that will allow you to put leadership opportunities in front of anyone in your organization, not just people who are managers. So the first one, for managers in the room, this is called leadership breadcrumbs. And the idea here is that you want to use your existing team meetings or team syncs to provide visibility into problems that go beyond the local team, all right? So this can be really, really uncomfortable to start with, because I think if, in your stand-ups, you probably like moving tickets across the board and, getting stuff checked in, code reviews, all right? So you gotta keep doing that, but I want you to add a little bit more spice onto it. And think about, as a manager, all of the other problems happening in the organization, and you have to take kind of a leap of faith that if you start talking about those things with your team, all right, start talking about them, invite discussion. No, I didn't say invite complaining, invite discussion, all right? You have to believe that if you do this enough, wait and repeat, eventually someone will say, oh, hey, I have an idea on how we might fix that. And then maybe a little bit further, hey, if I have a little bit of spare time, I'd like to try and fix it. And if you get real lucky, not only do I have an idea that I want to try and do it, I'm requesting some time to formally go fix it. Now, if you start seeing this behavior, the last thing you want to do is sponsor it and reward it. Now, sponsoring it and rewarding it doesn't mean you just approve every single thing that some random dude on your team comes up with. Sponsoring it means saying, like, in the team meeting, that's a good idea, thanks for bringing it up, all right? Reward the behavior that you want to see. Now, if someone really does come up with a good idea that you want to fund, then go ahead and sponsor it. And I've had many occasions where people have done that in my organizations, and I'll share some examples of it later. So this is Leadership Breadcrumbs, tool for managers. Now, if you're an individual, I want to give you a similar tool. And this is the tool that kind of unlocked the start of my career. I called it the golden question. It's a very, very simple question that you as an individual contributor can ask managers, your peers, anyone you might think is in a position to provide you with opportunities. It's a very simple question. What would you do if you had another pair of hands? It's just that simple. And if you ask this question to the right people in your organization, you will be stunned at the amount of opportunities that come your way. Think about all the unsolved problems that you have in your head right now. Literally, think about this for 20 seconds. Pretend I'm asking you this question. What would you do if you had another pair of hands? Just think about it, all right? I bet you will come up with 5 ideas within the next 20 seconds that someone within your organization could help you with, all right? So that's the golden question. All right, so those are 2 tools. I want to move on to important idea number 2. This one's very important. It's the idea that anyone can be a leader. You don't need specific traits, all right? So the question is, do you really need specific traits to become a leader, all right? An entire industry wants you to believe this. I will talk about some of the most, biggest proponents of this belief, but $24 billion a year are spent on trying to prove this idea, leadership training, leadership camps, et cetera. And I bet every single person in this room has bought into it in one way or another. So let's walk through a few examples of how you have all contributed to this idea that specific traits are required to be a leader. So books, all right? How many of you have a shelf full of these books collecting dust back home? Oh, you even raised your hand. This is a good audience. not a shy audience. I have, in fact, a shelf of these at home that I think I've read like 2 of them. Conferences, welcome to Refactor, about $500. Classes, around $2,000 if you want to get some specific training. Let's move on though, because this is kind of like entry-level leadership stuff, all right? Let's move on to like what real leaders do to get the traits they need to succeed. Leadership seminars, all right? This is a real thing. I don't know if, last time I did this presentation, I met someone who had actually gone to this specific one. But for $10,000, only $10,000, you can have Irvin Magic Johnson, Sue Zorman, Tony Robbins, Sylvester Stallone, and Pitbull teach you how to be a leader, all right? So this is not a Pitbull concert. This is Pitbull dancing leadership into the souls of 1,000 people, all right? That is what that is, for $10,000. Now, still, even this is just like wannabe leadership. So let's move on. Let's just move on to like the real heavy hitters, the MBA, all right? So for $100,000, you may see, if you look closely, you may see, anyway, I won't get into that. So anyway, like there's a whole industry trying to convince you that you need to pay to pick up these specific traits. A couple years back, I think this was like 10 years back now, Google did a survey called Project Oxygen, and the purpose of this really was to figure out like what are the required leadership traits, and they came up with more than this, but these are the top 5. So vision, empathy, empowerment, charisma, and expertise required to be a leader, at least the top 5 traits. So I thought to myself, hey, I'm in tech. I'm going to take these traits and I'm going to apply them to tech leaders that I see in the world. And let's see if this actually matches up. This like $1 million research survey, let's see how it stacks up against reality. You guys want to do that with me? Yeah. Let's do it. Okay, let's start with number 1. This is an easy one. All right, Steve Jobs from Apple, visionary, charismatic. All right. This is a Apple org chart diagram, all right? You'll notice that all of the arrows point directly to Steve Jobs, so not a very empowering leader, all right? Now, let's move on to maybe one that's a little bit tougher, definitely tougher. This military commando, sorry, it's not military commando. This is Jeff Bezos, and if you read his leadership philosophy, if you guys are into this sort of thing, he's a very, very empowering leader. So Amazon has this idea of like 2 pizza teams. They send little squads off to solve really difficult problems. So actually a very empowering leadership style, worth reading about, but maybe has some downsides. Let's see. Amazon warehouse workers skip bathroom breaks to keep jobs, says report. All right. And this was actually one of the nicer articles I could find about this culture. So not a really, really empathetic culture. All right. Elon Musk, one of my favorite people. I think you would all be aware this guy is like launching rockets into space, digging tunnels under LA. He's giving you like the future of transportation. So really an absolute genius, but also maybe burning out a little bit. And then finally, one character that we all like, Mark Zuckerberg. I would say that everyone has to admit vision, expertise. Yeah. But hey, look, like there are entire internet communities devoted to determining whether or not this man is a robot. So no charisma. So I'm going to say, like, you know, how are you supposed to know? My claim is that this is not true, but there are no traits you can measure. Like, how are you supposed to know that the nerd lawyer and the stoner with the unfortunate hat are both going to end up being Nobel Prize winners? You can't know. So, quick story. I call this story Quiet Tony. This is about an architect that I was trying to hire back in my youth when I was a young manager. I was trying to hire an architect, and I had this belief that if you wanted to be an architect, you had to be, very personable. You're going to be training other engineers. You have to be very, very talkative. You have to be outgoing, charismatic, etc. So I was interviewing this fellow. One of the most difficult interviews I've had in my career. It's one of those types where you get the person in the room and you ask them what their name is, and you got to drag that out. Like, I like to start every interview with like a little bit of personal background. Tony wouldn't give me anything, right? But when we got to doing our whiteboard coding exercises, Tony gets up, he goes through my 5 hardest questions, I think in like 20 minutes, leaving me with like another 20 minutes to sit and stare at him in silence. I don't know, but he was a genius, all right? When we got to the hiring panel, And again, I'm the manager, so I'm making the final call. We go around the room, hire. Everyone loves Tony because he's brilliant. Gets to me, and I go, oh, we're not going to hire Tony because he's not charismatic enough to be an architect, right? That is what I said. This was a long time ago, so you guys are all looking at me very mean right now. So my director at the time pulled me aside and was like, hey, Nick, I'm kind of disappointed in what you just said. And you guys, you know what disappointed means. It means I think you're an idiot. So we ended up hiring Tony at the behest of my director, and could not have been a better hire. He ended up bringing all sorts of new machine learning techniques to the team, grew into one of the best mentors. And years later, I asked Tony, like, hey, look, in that initial meeting, like, what was up? I mean, like, you ended up being the best at teaching everyone, but it didn't come across at all. And he said, hey, Nick, like, you asked me about my past, what I've been doing before. I was working at GE writing software for laundry machines. I just wasn't passionate about it. And when you gave me this opportunity, it's something I'd always wanted to do. I always wanted to go to school for it. And it unlocked my passion. So keep that story in mind, because I claim passion is leadership fuel. And there's a story done in 1992 by Kreifel and Patler. They did a longitudinal study over the course of 20 years. They took 1,500 people. They asked them, would you choose your career for passion or for money? 20 years later, there are 101 millionaires. Of those, 100 chose passion, and only one said they set out to get money. All right? So passion is leadership fuel. Instead of passion, look for traits. Or excuse me, instead of traits. You guys know what I mean. Instead of traits, look for passion. I want to give you a tool to try and figure out how to unlock passion in your team. So this is called the blue flame. If you guys haven't heard of this concept, the blue flame is the idea. Blue flame is the idea that you try and find perfect alignment between what your business needs and what an individual's personal desires are. And if you can get those two things to overlap, you unlock the highest possible output. That's the idea behind the blue flame, if you've never heard that term before. And you can use kind of a simple approach to do this during one-on-ones. I call these blue flame one-on-ones. Don't literally walk into a one-on-one with this chart. Just keep it in your head. But you're trying to figure out intrinsic motivators. What would you do if no one was telling you what to do? What team problems would you fix if you had the choice? What do you want to learn? Like, these are intrinsic motivators. And then there's extrinsic motivators. You know, what are the major problems faced by the business? What is your manager talking about in those breadcrumb meetings? Like, these larger extrinsic motivators. And if you can find the intersection between those two things, that person will be operating in the blue flame. Now, for individuals, I want to make this, I'll add one more thing to it to make it a little bit more accurate. Because one challenge I think everyone has is you can't really see yourself clearly. I think there's kind of a Heisenberg principle to understanding what you yourself are good at. So I want to add one other thing, which is team member feedback. Like, instead of you thinking about like what you're personally motivated by, try and add this other circle, which is ask people you trust, what do you think I'm good at? And get that kind of 360 view, and then intersect those things, all right? So that's an individual tool to help you connect to your passion. The final thing that I want to give you guys is the idea that even if you have passion and some opportunity, you still got to have like a spark to light it, all right? There's something, I think you guys would believe, something for all of you folks who consider yourselves leaders, something triggered it. Like, there was a moment from point A to point B where you became a leader. If you think about it, I'm sure you'll figure out what that moment is. But how do you give it to everyone else? Like, how do you create those leaders? According to the American Management Association, which asked the question, what is the biggest obstacle that people face toward becoming leaders? Fear of being held responsible for failure was like by far the #1 inhibitor. So this is great because we now know what the problem is. It's fear, right? It's fear of being held responsible. The first rule of leadership is that everything is your fault. So what do we do then? What do we get people to spark into that leadership? Is it training? Will training help them overcome their fear? Pressure will do it. If you put people in a high pressure situation, they will sink or swim, but I would claim that that's not a sustainable approach to developing leaders. You may disagree. Is it mentors? Is it like Pitbull invited to the office to dance a little bit? But there is some way that you can create a leadership moment. So I believe that it has to do with culture. And by fostering the right cultural environment, you will create more leadership moments. So a quick story about that, my leadership moment. I was as a young engineer, I think you're responsible for complaining about PMs. So I of course, was doing my duty as a, I think, 3-year tenured engineer in my mentor's office, complaining about how bad our product roadmap was and how the PMs didn't understand the strategy and yada, yada, yada. And my mentor at the time said, yeah, Nick, you're a great manager, but you actually suck as a leader. And I said, wow, thank you, mentor. That makes me feel great. He went on. He said, who do you think is responsible for fixing these problems that you're complaining about, right? Leaders take responsibility for what happens next. So are you going to sit here in my office and keep complaining about this, or actually go and do something about it? And that was my leadership moment. That is the exact instant that I switched into a mentality that I was going to take responsibility for what happens next, right? I left his office, went to my GM's office. I said what my concerns were. And my GM said, Nick, I can see you're passionate about this. I'm going to give you a team to go work on our planning efforts for the next quarter. This is not a normal thing, all right? You know, it's not a normal thing. And that's why I think culture is the answer. Because the GM didn't have to do anything. He could have said, get the hell out of my office. He said, no, like, I can see your passion. I can see that you really care about this. I want to invest in you. So creating leadership culture, how do we do it? You know, I made fun of Mark earlier. I'm still going to make fun of him. But he at least tried, I think, to head in this direction with that move fast and break things quote. You've probably heard this 1,000 times. This tended to not hold up so well over time, but it was in service of creating leadership culture. Let's maybe rewind the clock a little bit and go to something that is less controversial today. I want to share with you guys a tool that I use with every single team that I have set up. It's the Nordstrom Employee Handbook. If you guys have never seen this, take photos of this. This is really important. So this card was given to every employee at Nordstrom up until about 15 or 20 years ago. And I'll just read it for you real quick. Every new employee. Welcome to Nordstrom. We're glad to have you with our company. Our number one goal is to provide outstanding customer service. Set both your personal and professional goals high. We have great confidence in your ability to achieve them. Nordstrom rules. Rule number 1, use your good judgment in all situations. There will be no additional rules. That is the most badass thing you can give to people in your organization if you're expecting them to bloom into new leaders, all right? So the second thing I want to give you, and I think you heard about this earlier in the day, it's sponsoring, right? So you all as managers or people in positions of power, you can help people on your team in a couple different ways. One is mentoring, like the idea that like, hey, let's go sit and chat about your problems and I'll give you some free coffee in return. But you can also use your powers in a different way, and that is to sponsor good ideas. And sponsoring takes someone in your organization and gives them an opportunity to step up, overcoming the fear, right? Now, the way that you can do this, you can look for people who want to do things in their spare time. You can say, that's a good idea, I'll let you do that. That's like the lowest effort, way to sponsor something. Yeah, that's a good idea, use your spare time. You can set aside hack days, you can dedicate time in the schedule, but if you're a manager, just remember you have all these tools in your repertoire that go well beyond sitting down and giving people coffee. Screw the coffee, give people opportunities and let them grow, all right? So that's the important difference, sponsoring versus mentorship. All right, well, I guess the final thing with that, if you sponsor an idea and it turns out well, give the person credit as well, like help them grow, all right? All right, so just to wrap everything up, to start a fire, you need oxygen, fuel, and a spark. And I claim that to create a leader, you need opportunity, passion, and permission. Now, hopefully you've absorbed all the different tools. I do want to talk about some results. Use these approaches in lots of different ways over the last couple of years, both at Reddit and Looker. For technical contributions, At Reddit, our continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline came up from this. We had someone really excited about Kubernetes microservices. Reddit is now running on microservice architecture because of this. Similarly, we had someone who's really excited about GraphQL. Reddit had this atrocious, I won't even talk about it, API, all now available on high-speed GraphQL. People contributions at both Reddit and Looker, employee mentoring programs and technology guilds have spun up from this approach. The other cool thing that tends to happen with this is you can get people doing things that aren't strictly technical or strictly, like shipping stuff. We have a lot of nonprofit efforts and energy spinning up out of this as well. Okay, how much time I got left?
About 7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay. So I'll use the last 7 minutes just to breeze through a couple associated leadership tips that I just care about. And I got 45 minutes on this day, so I can do it with it what I want. So modern leaderships that I think you have to think about if you want to be successful in this world. First one is leaders have to embrace change. This is a diagram of all the different web UI development frameworks up until 2016. I didn't do past 2016 because it's just not even possible to fit them on any diagram. I believe 3 new frameworks have been released while I'm doing this talk. But the important thing, though, is leaders have to go with that. You have to understand that change is going to be continuous, absorb it, and inspire your team to change as well. The second is your network is your net worth. And I found someone gave me this pithy quote. The most valuable coding language you can learn is English, or whatever your primary language is. In the long run, the people that you know and the relationships that you build will outlast your code. I guarantee it, all right? Code is a depreciating asset. Your network is an appreciating asset. For managers in the room, the way that you source people into your organizations has fundamentally changed. If you are still a skeptic around using boot camps, if you still think you need a $150,000 MIT ring to be successful in the modern tech world, this is no longer true. This is a chart showing how quickly boot camps are being adopted. At Reddit and at Looker, we have used boot camp graduates to successfully staff all the way up into our leadership layers. The corner has been turned on boot camps. If you are struggling with hiring for D&I, walk out of this. Don't listen to anything else I said in this talk. But if you have a D&I problem at your organization, go try and hire from boot camp right now. I guarantee it's going to work. And the final thing I want to leave you all with, actually, wait, this is the most important. I'll give you 2 things you got to remember, all right? This is the most important. The reason I care about this, the reason I'm get up in front of you guys and give you all these tools is because fundamentally, leaders, if you consider yourself a leader, you must make new leaders, all right? So please take the tools, take the ideas that I've given you. And I'm not perfect. I don't know if I've given you a perfect formula for it, but please take what I've given you, use it in your own best way, back in your organization to help new leaders bloom. And that's what I ask of you. So with that, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I actually did have one other thing, social media stuff. So if you missed Tia Caldwell's session, it's way better than the one I just did, and it's going to be recorded, so check it out. Follow me on Nick Cald, and DevColor, which is an organization dedicated to developing Black leaders in technology, has recently started up here in Atlanta. If you're looking for a place where you can send up-and-coming people of color in tech, please look into DevColor. It's the best organization that I'm aware of. All right? Okay, thank you guys. Now I'm done. Thanks.